Sit back, relax, and welcome to Reading Hours. Today's book is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Please let us know in the comments from where you are watching, or if there is a book you want us to summarize in future. The Secret History by Donna Tartt, published in 1992, quickly became a defining work in modern literary fiction, captivating readers with its blend of psychological suspense, classical scholarship, and dark mystery. Tartt's debut novel is notable not just for its gripping narrative, but for how it subverts the typical murder mystery genre by embedding the story in an elite, insular world of classical studies at a small Vermont college. The novel explores themes of obsession, morality, beauty, and the corrosive effects of secrecy and privilege. Its richly drawn characters are bound together by a shared fascination with ancient Greek culture, which ultimately leads them down a dangerous path. Controversial for its portrayal of intellectual elitism and moral ambiguity, The Secret History also delves into how a group of young people grappling with their own insecurities and desires can become entwined in violence and tragedy. The narrative is told from the perspective of Richard Papen, an outsider who becomes both participant and observer in the unfolding drama. As readers, we are drawn into a story that is as much about the intoxicating allure of belonging and power as it is about the consequences of crossing moral boundaries. This summary will guide you through the novel's twists and turns in 10 detailed parts, offering an immersive retelling that captures the novel's haunting beauty and psychological depth. Let's step into the cloistered world of Hampton College, where an elite group of students live by their own rules, and the past is never truly past. Richard Papen's story begins with a sense of quiet yearning and escape. Born and raised in a modest working-class town in California, Richard is acutely aware of his ordinary origins. His parents are practical, down-to-earth people who never quite understood his restlessness or his hunger for something more refined and meaningful. After his father's death and feeling stuck in a life that seems predetermined, Richard takes a leap, moving across the country to attend Hampton College in Vermont. The East Coast, with its ancient traditions and ivy-covered campuses, represents to him a chance to reinvent himself, to break away from the constraints of his past. At Hampton, Richard is struck immediately by the contrast between his own background and the world he finds himself in. The college is smaller and more exclusive than the sprawling state universities he's familiar with. It is a place that seems steeped in history, and its students carry themselves with a quiet but unmistakable air of privilege. Richard's outsider perspective colors the way he observes his new surroundings. He's both fascinated and intimidated. His fascination centers around a very small, highly selective group of students who study ancient Greek under the guidance of the legendary Professor Julian Morrow. This group, Henry Winter, Bunny Corcoran, Charles and Camilla Macaulay, and Francis Abernathy, are unlike anyone Richard has met before. They live in a different world, one where intellectual pursuit, aesthetic beauty, and classical ideals dominate their daily lives. They read and speak in Greek, debate philosophy, and approach life with an almost otherworldly intensity. Richard admires their ease and confidence, qualities he lacks. Unlike him, they were born into privilege, attended the best schools, and seem immune to the anxieties and insecurities that plague him. Yet, he senses that beneath their polished exteriors, lies something complicated and secretive. Their conversations are often cryptic, filled with references to ancient myths and tragedies that hint at a worldview far removed from ordinary concerns. The leader of this group is Henry Winter, a figure of enigmatic brilliance. Henry is striking, tall, thin, with a pale, sharp-featured face that seems almost sculpted out of marble. He exudes control and intellect, speaking with a calm precision that commands attention. Despite his youth, Henry has the demeanor of someone who has been shaped by centuries of classical tradition. Richard is both drawn to and wary of him, recognizing Henry's magnetic but potentially dangerous influence on the others. Camilla, Henry's stepsister, embodies a quiet and reserved beauty. There is an ethereal quality to her, as if she belongs more to the world of the ancients they study than the modern one around them. Charles, Camilla's twin, contrasts with her grace through his restless and unpredictable temperament. Francis, with his flamboyant manner and aristocratic background, adds color and complexity to the group, while Bunny's easygoing, sometimes careless arrogance makes him both lovable and a potential liability. Richard is slowly welcomed into this inner circle, an invitation that feels like a dream come true. To be accepted by these brilliant, mysterious people is to transcend his humble origins. He begins attending their study sessions in the ancient Greek language, where they read Plato, Euripides, and other classical texts in the original tongue. The experience is intoxicating. These works, filled with themes of fate, beauty, and tragedy, resonate deeply within him. But this is not just an academic exercise. The group's obsession with the classical world shapes their entire existence. They seek to live according to ideals that often clash with the norms of contemporary life. Their philosophy borders on the mystical, and their detachment from the outside world creates a bubble where their own rules apply. They talk openly about beauty as a form of moral truth, yet their discussions frequently drift toward darker territory: the nature of evil, the power of secrecy, and the consequences of transgression. Richard's narration is candid and reflective, as he hints at a dreadful event looming in the background. From the very beginning, he tells the story with the weight of hindsight, knowing that what unfolds is a tale of tragedy and guilt. There is a chilling inevitability to his voice. He describes the allure of the group and their ideas, but also the slow unraveling that will follow. The group's dynamic is both captivating and unsettling. They share a bond forged through their study of ancient tragedies, but also through secrets they keep from the rest of the world. Their closeness creates an intense atmosphere, one that alternates between camaraderie and underlying tension. Richard, as the newcomer, is both an observer and a participant, trying to navigate his desire for acceptance and his growing awareness of how fragile their equilibrium really is. What makes their story so compelling is the way it intertwines the intellectual and the emotional. The characters are not merely students of history. They are living out a kind of modern tragedy, where the ancient themes of hubris, fate, and moral ambiguity play out in their own lives. The classical texts they study serve as both inspiration and warning, echoing through their decisions and actions. Richard's perspective captures this beautifully. He admires the elegance and brilliance of the group, but is also haunted by the darkness lurking beneath. He describes moments of beauty and connection, as well as growing unease and fear. The narrative moves with a deliberate pace, unfolding like a Greek tragedy itself, where each act builds tension and foreboding. In this initial phase of the story, the novel explores questions of identity and belonging. Richard's transformation is both external and internal. He is reshaping himself through education and association, but also confronting the moral complexities of the world he has entered. The reader is drawn into his conflicted feelings, the excitement of new possibilities mixed with the anxiety of not fully understanding the forces at play. The writing is rich with detail, evoking the physical setting of Hampton College, the crisp New England air, the ancient buildings, the quiet classrooms, and the atmosphere of intellectual rigor. But beyond this lies a psychological landscape where characters grapple with their ambitions, fears, and desires. As the story progresses, hints of what is to come grow stronger. Richard's narration is laced with a sense of inevitability and regret, making the reader wonder what catastrophic event could so profoundly shape the lives of these gifted young people. The allure of the secret world they inhabit is palpable, but so is the sense of danger. This opening sets the tone for a novel that is as much about the seduction of beauty and intellect as it is about the consequences of crossing moral lines. It invites the audience to peer behind the curtain of privilege and intellect to witness the vulnerabilities and contradictions that lie beneath. In this way, The Secret History becomes more than a story about a murder or a group of students. It becomes a meditation on the human condition, on the fragile boundaries between light and darkness, and on the ways in which our ideals can lead us to ruin. Richard's voice guides us through this world with honesty and insight, offering a narrative that is both haunting and unforgettable. As Richard settles deeper into the rarefied world of Henry and his friends, the rhythm of their lives takes on a ritualistic quality, blending academic rigor with an almost cult-like devotion to their shared intellectual and aesthetic pursuits. Their study sessions are more than mere classes. They are ceremonies where the ancient Greek texts become living conversations and the boundaries between the past and the present blur. Under Julian Marrow's subtle but commanding guidance, the group delves into the mysteries of Greek tragedy and philosophy, and the lessons they extract are not simply literary but existential. The ancient Greeks, with their tragic heroes and divine punishments, become a mirror for the group's own ideals and conflicts. They are drawn particularly to the idea of hamartia, a fatal flaw or error in judgment, and hubris, excessive pride that invites downfall. This intellectual framework, at once seductive and dangerous, shapes their worldview and the way they see themselves. They begin to imagine their lives as if they are players in an ancient drama, with destiny and fate intertwined. Richard, initially dazzled by this world, soon realizes that beneath the surface charm lies a complex network of personal histories and emotional struggles. Each member of the group carries scars and secrets that the others either don't see or choose to ignore. Henry Winter, for instance, is not just the brilliant, cold mastermind. He is also deeply controlling, driven by a ruthless need for order and perfection. His ability to manipulate the group's dynamics is subtle but absolute. Camilla and Charles Macaulay, the twins, bring a volatile tension to the group. Camilla is graceful and somewhat aloof, but also fiercely protective of her brother, whose instability and erratic behavior create cracks in the fragile facade of their friendship. Francis Abernathy's charm and wit mask a deeper insecurity and a sense of alienation, despite his privileged background. And Bunny Corcoran, the largest and most outspoken member, presents a kind of reckless joviality that hides his own vulnerabilities. His carelessness and neediness foreshadow trouble ahead, and his relationship with the others is complicated by both affection and underlying resentment. Richard's role in this microcosm is ambiguous. As an outsider brought into the fold, he admires and envies the others, yet he remains somewhat detached, observing as much as participating. His narration conveys a mixture of awe, insecurity, and growing apprehension. He longs to belong fully, but senses the undercurrents of tension and mistrust beneath the surface. The atmosphere of their secluded study sessions and private social gatherings is thick with a sense of exclusivity and secrecy. They gather in Henry's family estate, an old and grand house in the Vermont countryside, where the outside world feels distant and irrelevant. Here, the group crafts an almost mythical existence, surrounded by the beauty of classical art and the quiet of nature, seemingly insulated from time and consequence. However, the fragile harmony of their lives begins to crack when Bunny Corcoran's behavior becomes increasingly problematic. Bunny, with his affable but demanding personality, frequently drains the group emotionally and financially. His careless spending and persistent borrowing create tension, and his tendency to speak indiscreetly threatens the group's privacy. The others are aware that Bunny's easygoing facade hides a dangerous recklessness, yet they tolerate him, bound by years of friendship and a complex web of dependency. It is during a winter weekend trip to New Hampshire that the tensions reach a breaking point. The group, escaping the confines of the campus and Henry's estate, ventures into the snowy landscape for a getaway that quickly turns ominous. The trip is meant to be a brief reprieve, a chance to bond and escape the pressures of their isolated academic world. But instead, it lays bare the fractures in their relationships. The dynamics shift palpably as Bunny's provocative behavior escalates. His careless remarks about the group's secrets and his increasingly erratic attitude create anxiety among the others. They recognize the threat Bunny poses, not just to their friendships, but to the fragile world they have built around their shared identity and secrecy. This weekend is a turning point where the group's underlying fractures become impossible to ignore. The weight of their shared secrets, the pressure of maintaining appearances, and the intensity of their intellectual obsessions combine into a volatile mix. They are trapped between their desire for beauty and transcendence and the harsh realities of their flawed human nature. The narrative tension intensifies as Richard, from his vantage point, reveals how this moment of instability sets in motion a chain of events that will have irreversible consequences. His voice, calm and reflective, belies the turmoil beneath. We see the group's collective psychology unravel as fear, paranoia, and desperation creep in. Donna Tartt's storytelling here is masterful. She captures the claustrophobic atmosphere of the group, their psychological entanglements, and the way their classical studies inform not just their language, but their ethics and decisions. The Greek tragedies they study, with their fatal flaws and inevitable downfalls, become a lens through which the characters view their own lives and the choices they make. This part of the story explores the dangerous allure of exclusivity and intellectual elitism. group's belief in their superiority, their detachment from societal norms, and their willingness to bend or break moral rules for the sake of their ideals leads them down a dark path. The question looms: how far will they go to protect their secret world? Richard's perspective is crucial because he both participates and critiques. His narration reveals the seduction of the group's ideology, but also the cracks, moments of doubt, guilt, and fear that hint at the disaster to come. He reflects on the price of their obsession with beauty and purity, and the consequences of trying to live outside ordinary moral bounds. The interplay of friendship and manipulation is central here. Henry's control over the group is both magnetic and oppressive. He dictates not only their intellectual pursuits, but also their social behavior, creating a hierarchy where loyalty is demanded and dissent is dangerous. Richard senses the psychological weight this places on everyone, especially Bunny, whose easy charm masks growing desperation. The story also highlights the theme of appearance versus reality. On the surface, the group seems flawless, sophisticated, and united by high-minded ideals. Yet underneath, personal weaknesses and conflicting desires simmer, threatening to explode. This contrast deepens the sense of suspense and foreboding. The natural world around them, the cold, silent woods, the snow-covered hills, serves as a backdrop that mirrors their isolation and growing alienation. The beauty of the landscape contrasts sharply with the emotional chaos brewing within the group, reinforcing the novel's recurring theme of the tension between beauty and destruction. Throughout this phase, Richard's narration is immersive and intimate. He allows the audience to see the internal lives of the characters, their fears and motivations, without excusing their flaws. His honesty creates a sense of empathy mixed with critical distance. As the story moves forward, the question of morality becomes more urgent. What lines are the group willing to cross to preserve their secret? How do their classical ideals justify or conflict with their actions? These dilemmas intensify the psychological complexity of the narrative. The tension that builds during this time is not just about what the group does, but about the fragile psychological state of each member. The combination of intellectual intensity, social pressure, and personal vulnerability creates a pressure cooker atmosphere. Donna Tartt's prose is rich and detailed, capturing not only the characters' inner worlds, but also the textures of their environment: the cold air, the weight of snow, the muted colors of winter. These details immerse the reader in the setting and heighten the emotional impact. By the end of this phase, the sense of impending crisis is palpable. The group's carefully maintained world is starting to crack, and Richard's narration foreshadows the consequences with a mix of dread and inevitability. The story remains both a psychological thriller and a profound exploration of friendship, guilt, and the destructive power of ideals. This part deepens the mystery and complexity introduced earlier, setting the stage for the tragic events that will define the rest of the story. It invites the audience to reflect on the cost of intellectual obsession and the dangers of living according to ideals divorced from reality. The fragile equilibrium that the group once maintained shatters irrevocably, plunging Richard and the others into a nightmarish reality they had long tried to keep at bay. The moment that had been looming with increasing tension finally arrives: the death of Edmund "Bunny" Corcoran. It is not just a tragic event, but a seismic rupture that forces every member to confront the consequences of their tangled loyalties, secrets, and intellectual hubris. Bunny's death is sudden yet, in a dark and twisted way, almost inevitable. His behavior had become more reckless, his demands on the group more insistent, and the pressure he exerted, financially and emotionally, had created a toxic undercurrent in the carefully constructed social fabric. The decision to kill Bunny is a catastrophic turning point, one born out of desperation, fear, and a grim calculation to preserve the group's secrecy and sanity. Donna Tartt does not treat this act lightly or merely as a plot device. Instead, she explores the psychological landscape of the characters in harrowing detail. The murder is a moment that both shatters and defines them, revealing the depths of their vulnerabilities and the devastating cost of their pursuit of beauty and transcendence. It is a culmination of the fatal flaws of character that the ancient Greeks wrote about, a real-life tragedy playing out in a modern guise. The aftermath of Bunny's death is a tangled web of panic, rationalization, and fractured alliances. Richard's narration becomes even more reflective and somber, capturing the chaos of their emotional states and the surreal nature of their predicament. The group, once bound by friendship and intellectual admiration, now faces suspicion, guilt, and a pervasive fear that their secret will unravel. Each character responds differently to the trauma. Henry Winter, whose cold and controlling nature had dominated the group, tries to impose a ruthless logic to the situation. His detachment and strategic thinking steer the group's efforts to cover up the murder, but even he cannot fully mask the cracks in his facade. Henry's vision of himself as a master of fate is tested, revealing his own vulnerabilities and the limits of control. Camilla Macaulay, delicate and reserved, is caught between her loyalty to Charles and the overwhelming reality of what they have done. Her quiet strength is contrasted with moments of fragility, and her emotional turmoil highlights the personal costs behind the group's intellectual bravado. Charles himself, more volatile and erratic, spirals further into instability, his guilt and fear manifesting in unpredictable ways. Francis Abernathy, who often seemed detached and carefree, shows signs of deep internal conflict. His charm and wit, which once masked his insecurities, now falter under the weight of the group's dark secret. His privileged background, rather than protecting him, leaves him isolated in his guilt and confusion. Richard remains both participant and observer, his narration a complex mix of shock, regret, and a desperate attempt to understand the forces that led to this tragedy. His outsider perspective deepens as he grapples with his own role in the events and the moral ambiguities that surround them. The group's efforts to hide the murder reveal not only their desperation, but also the fragility of their social experiment. Their intellectual idealism, once a source of strength and identity, becomes a prison that traps them in fear and paranoia. The tension between their desire to transcend ordinary morality and the crushing weight of guilt becomes a central theme. Donna Tartt's prose captures this psychological unraveling with exquisite detail. The mood is claustrophobic and intense, reflecting the characters' isolation both from the outside world and from each other. The Vermont landscape, so serene and beautiful, contrasts starkly with the darkness enveloping the group, heightening the sense of tragic irony. The practical challenges of covering up the crime are described with a chilling realism. The group's actions to dispose of Bunny's body and fabricate alibis are fraught with tension and dread. Every detail of their plan feels like a thread that could snap at any moment, unraveling everything they have tried to protect. Amidst this turmoil, the novel continues to explore the theme of fate versus free will. The characters' attempts to control their destiny, to live by the ideals of ancient Greece, collide violently with the reality of human weakness and chance. The murder is both a catastrophic choice and a fateful event, blurring the lines between intention and inevitability. As the story unfolds, Richard reflects on the nature of guilt and complicity. He struggles with the moral ambiguity of his involvement and the question of whether any of them can truly escape the consequences of their actions. This introspection adds a profound philosophical dimension to the narrative, inviting the audience to ponder the cost of secrets and lies. The dynamics within the group become increasingly strained. Trust, once the foundation of their friendship, erodes under the weight of suspicion and fear. The characters' interactions grow tense and guarded as each tries to protect themselves and the fragile veneer of normalcy. Donna Tartt's character development shines in these moments of crisis. She reveals the complexity of human psychology, showing how trauma can both bond and divide. The relationships become more layered and fraught, filled with unspoken accusations and simmering resentments. The narrative tension escalates as outside forces begin to close in. Authorities and the community become unwitting threats, and the group must navigate the dangers of exposure. Their isolation intensifies, both physically in the remote setting and emotionally within their fractured bonds. Throughout this phase, the novel maintains its lush, descriptive style. The natural world remains a vivid backdrop, with the changing seasons and landscapes reflecting the characters' inner turmoil. The cold Vermont winters, with their stark beauty, underscore the themes of death and decay, while the fleeting moments of warmth and light hint at the fragile hope that still lingers. The moral questions raised here are profound. The novel probes the idea of whether the pursuit of beauty and transcendence can justify violence and betrayal. It asks whether the ideals of the past can survive in a modern world marked by complexity and imperfection. The story's psychological depth and narrative intensity keep the audience invested, balancing suspense with philosophical reflection. Richard's voice, both confessional and analytical, draws the viewer into the emotional heart of the tragedy, making the characters' struggles palpable and immediate. As the consequences of Bunny's death ripple outward, the novel begins to explore the long-term effects of trauma and guilt. The characters are no longer simply students or friends. They are people irrevocably changed by their actions, haunted by the past and uncertain of the future. This part marks a turning point where the story shifts from an exploration of friendship and intellectual obsession to a dark meditation on crime, punishment, and the human capacity for denial and self-destruction. The tone becomes more somber, the stakes higher, and the narrative richer in emotional complexity. Donna Tartt's mastery of suspense and psychological realism keeps the audience on edge, even as the story delves into philosophical and ethical questions. The blend of thriller elements with literary depth makes this section compelling and thought-provoking. Ultimately, the group's attempt to live as if untouched by ordinary morality unravels, revealing the fragile nature of their ideals and the tragic consequences of their actions. The story captures the tension between aspiration and reality, innocence and corruption, friendship and betrayal, leaving the audience eager to follow the characters through the next phase of their harrowing journey. The fragile equilibrium that once seemed to hold the group together now begins to crack and splinter under the relentless weight of fear, suspicion, and guilt. After the irreversible act they committed, the members of the circle no longer share the same sense of camaraderie or intellectual invincibility. Instead, each one is trapped in a private prison of torment and paranoia, the consequences of their choices settling like a heavy fog over every interaction. The story delves deeper into the characters' fractured psyches and the moral wilderness they find themselves in, exploring how the trauma has started to erode their identities and relationships. Richard, the story's narrator, watches as the group that once seemed untouchable, bound by shared passion for Greek ideals and aesthetic beauty, begins to unravel. His voice carries a mix of disbelief and bitter introspection, a witness to the slow collapse of their former selves. What was once a brilliant experiment in living beyond ordinary moral constraints is now a cautionary tale about human frailty, the limits of intellectual arrogance, and the cost of secrets. Henry Winter, the group's enigmatic and brilliant leader, embodies this descent most vividly. His icy control and rational detachment, which had once inspired awe, now reveal their dark side. Henry's methodical mind becomes a double-edged sword. He relentlessly tries to keep the group together and maintain order. But in doing so, he suppresses emotions that inevitably demand release. His detachment becomes a mask for inner chaos, and his drive for perfection starts to look like cold calculation bordering on cruelty. The tension between Henry and the others becomes palpable. He remains the central figure in their efforts to cover up Bunny's death, and his insistence on secrecy and rigid control weighs heavily on everyone. His chilling calm contrasts sharply with the simmering panic that many feel, and his inability or unwillingness to openly confront their emotional turmoil further alienates him from the group. There is a sense that beneath his intellectual facade, Henry is as vulnerable and desperate as the rest, but he refuses to show it. Camilla Macaulay's quiet strength and gentleness also face severe tests. Her relationship with Charles grows more complex and fraught, shadowed by the enormity of their shared secret. Camilla struggles to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but the trauma threatens to overwhelm her delicate emotional balance. Her feelings for Charles are complicated by fear and guilt, and their once tender connection becomes strained under the pressure. Charles Macaulay, whose volatile temperament had always set him apart, begins to unravel visibly. His charm and wit, which often masked deeper insecurities, give way to nervousness and paranoia. He vacillates between moments of bravado and crushing despair, his emotional state teetering on the edge. The psychological weight of their crime crashes down on him with increasing force, and his erratic behavior threatens to draw unwanted attention. This volatility adds a dangerous unpredictability to the group's already precarious situation. Francis Abernathy, often the group's social butterfly, and the one who appeared least concerned with consequence, shows cracks beneath his carefree exterior. His usual wit and charm become tinged with unease, revealing the strain of living with such a devastating secret. His affluent background, once a shield, now isolates him in a unique way. He seems both removed from and deeply entangled in the group's fate. His internal conflict grows more visible, hinting at a fracture between his polished surface and inner guilt. For Richard, the murder marks a point of profound disillusionment. His youthful idealism, which had drawn him into the group's orbit, begins to fade as he faces the darker realities of human nature. His narration takes on a more reflective and somber tone, full of regret and self-questioning. He wrestles with his complicity and the murky ethics of their actions, recognizing that the boundaries between victim and perpetrator blur in their shared tragedy. His outsider status within the group becomes more pronounced, and he often feels like a bystander trapped inside a nightmare he cannot escape. The group's fragile unity is further threatened by external pressures. The threat of discovery looms large, and every interaction with the outside world feels charged with risk. The paranoia that their secret might leak out begins to erode their confidence and composure. What had once seemed like a self-contained universe of rarefied intellectual pursuit is now a cage of fear and suspicion. Donna Tartt's vivid descriptions of the Vermont setting heighten this mood. The serene, almost timeless beauty of the landscape contrasts sharply with the moral darkness engulfing the group. The harsh winters and crisp, cold air mirror the growing isolation and emotional chill that settle over the characters. The natural world, indifferent to their human suffering, serves as a stark reminder of their smallness and fragility. The group's practical efforts to maintain their secrecy become increasingly desperate and complicated. Every lie, every fabricated alibi, every furtive glance adds to the mounting tension. The weight of the secret consumes them, coloring their perceptions and interactions with a permanent sense of dread. Their psychological burden is as heavy as the physical task of hiding their crime. In the midst of this, relationships that once seemed unshakable begin to fracture. The trust that formed the foundation of their friendship is corroded by fear and suspicion. Small disagreements take on outsized significance as paranoia takes root. Each character guards their thoughts and feelings, afraid to reveal weakness or invite judgment. This emotional isolation deepens the sense of tragedy and loss. Tartt explores these themes with acute sensitivity, showing how trauma reshapes identity and relationships. The characters' attempts to return to some semblance of normal life only emphasize the distance that now separates them from their former selves. They are haunted not just by the act of murder, but by what it represents: the loss of innocence, the betrayal of ideals, and the shattering of their carefully curated identities. The novel also probes the psychological concept of denial, illustrating how the group struggles to reconcile their actions with their self-image. They attempt to rationalize the murder as a necessary evil, an intellectual exercise, or a tragic but justified act. Yet beneath these justifications lies an unspoken acknowledgement of the profound wrongness of what they have done. As their world grows smaller and more claustrophobic, the characters confront the limits of friendship and loyalty. The bonds forged in shared intellectual passion are tested by the demands of survival and the need to protect oneself. The story reveals how extreme circumstances can expose both the best and worst in people, illuminating the complexities of human nature. Richard's narration captures these emotional and psychological shifts with clarity and poignancy. His introspection brings a philosophical depth to the narrative, inviting the audience to consider the nature of guilt, responsibility, and the search for meaning in a fractured world. His voice, at once intimate and analytical, draws viewers into the heart of the tragedy. The interplay of light and shadow, beauty and horror, remains central to the novel's atmosphere. The intellectual allure that once drew Richard to Henry's circle now feels like a trap, a dangerous mirage that obscured the darker realities. The novel's lush prose underscores the tension between the aesthetic idealism of the characters and the brutal consequences of their actions. As the narrative progresses, the characters' emotional unraveling becomes more pronounced. The story builds toward a confrontation not just with the external world, but with the internal demons that haunt them. The mounting pressure threatens to explode, promising dramatic consequences for the group's future. This part of the story deepens the exploration of themes that run through the novel. The seductive danger of intellectual elitism, the fragile boundary between beauty and violence, and the moral ambiguity of human choices. It reminds the audience that beneath the allure of classical ideals lies a complex, often painful reality. The tension is both psychological and moral, creating a rich, layered narrative that captivates and challenges the viewer. Donna Tartt's skillful blending of suspense, character study, and philosophical inquiry keeps the story compelling and thought-provoking. The stage is now set for the next phase of the narrative, where the consequences of the group's actions become impossible to ignore, and the fragile illusions they have clung to threaten to crumble completely. The story's emotional and moral stakes have never been higher, and the reader is drawn inexorably toward the unfolding drama. The weight of their secret grows heavier with each passing day, as the members of the group find themselves increasingly trapped in a suffocating web of silence and fear. The murder they committed, once an unbearable shock, has now settled into a grim reality that colors every aspect of their lives. Each moment is fraught with the risk of discovery, and every interaction among them is shadowed by unspoken dread and simmering tension. The once close-knit circle begins to feel like a fragile glass vessel, cracking under the strain of their shared guilt. Richard's perspective remains deeply introspective, his narration revealing not only the external pressures, but also the internal conflicts that gnaw at each character. He watches as their personalities begin to unravel in different ways, exposing the varied ways people respond to trauma. There's an almost palpable sense that the crime has shifted something fundamental inside them all, something that no amount of rationalization or intellectualism can fully mask or mend. Henry, the enigmatic and commanding leader, maintains a cold, almost clinical composure, but beneath that surface, the strain is undeniable. His drive to control and dominate every aspect of their lives seems to be his way of managing his own fears, a desperate attempt to impose order on chaos. Yet his distant manner and sharp intellect also create a chilling sense of isolation, as if he has retreated behind a fortress of reason, cutting himself off from the emotional reality that the others cannot escape. Charles and Camilla's relationship, already complex, becomes even more fraught. Their shared secret binds them, but also places them in an emotional trap from which neither can fully escape. Moments of tenderness are punctuated by fear and suspicion, the dark shadow of what they've done hanging over every glance and gesture. Charles's volatile mood, swings, and growing paranoia threaten not only their fragile romance, but also the group's stability. His erratic behavior increasingly alarms the others, highlighting the emotional toll the crime has taken on him. Francis, who once masked his pain behind flamboyance and social charm, shows signs of slipping into deeper despair. His usual lightheartedness falters, revealing cracks in his facade. The lavish parties and alcohol-fueled distractions he often turned to now seem hollow, mere attempts to stave off the encroaching darkness. His background of privilege cannot shield him from the emotional consequences that plague them all. Throughout these shifting dynamics, Richard remains the observer and the reluctant participant, his own feelings of alienation growing. He is both inside and outside the group, never fully belonging, but unable to extricate himself from the tragic unfolding drama. His youthful idealism, which had drawn him to Henry's charismatic circle, is now tempered by a deepening cynicism. He questions the lofty ideals they once held dear, realizing how easily they crumbled under the weight of real-world consequences. The story also delves into the practical difficulties of living with such a secret. The group's interactions with the outside world become strained and fraught with danger. Routine moments, classes, social gatherings, even casual conversations are fraught with the possibility that someone might discover the truth. Their shared paranoia creates an atmosphere of constant vigilance and mistrust, not only toward outsiders, but sometimes even toward each other. Donna Tartt masterfully uses the setting to underscore the growing sense of entrapment. The verdant Vermont landscape, once a symbol of timeless beauty and escape, now feels like a confining cage. The changing seasons echo the shifting moods of the characters, with the darkening days and cold creeping in like the pervasive gloom in their lives. The familiar paths and college halls seem charged with menace, reminders of what they can never undo. As the days pass, the group's social and academic lives begin to unravel. Their concentration falters, and their usual intellectual pursuits lose their appeal. The pressure of maintaining their secret saps their energy and focus. Richard, once an eager student, feels his academic enthusiasm waning, replaced by a restless, haunted exhaustion. The murder's psychological fallout pervades every thought and action. Tensions within the group escalate in subtle but significant ways. Small disagreements flare into arguments, and undercurrents of blame and resentment emerge. Each member wrestles with feelings of guilt and responsibility, but no one is willing or able to confront these emotions openly. The silence between them is thick with unspoken accusations and fears, creating emotional distance where there was once intimacy. In this atmosphere of tension, Henry's role as the group's leader becomes increasingly fraught. His attempts to maintain control sometimes come across as cold and authoritarian, alienating those who once admired him. His insistence on secrecy and his refusal to allow any expression of doubt or weakness contribute to the group's fracturing. His brilliant mind, once a source of inspiration, now seems a source of dread, as if he is steering them toward an inevitable catastrophe. Camilla, caught between her feelings for Charles and her loyalty to Henry, faces her own emotional crisis. She struggles to maintain a calm exterior, but the weight of the secret and the fractured relationships around her wear heavily on her. Her quiet strength is tested, and she is forced to confront the possibility that their carefully constructed world might be unraveling beyond repair. Charles's paranoia becomes more pronounced. His erratic behavior raises the risk that their secret might slip out unintentionally. At times, he seems on the verge of a breakdown, his moods swinging wildly between bravado and despair. His inability to cope with the consequences of their crime threatens the entire group's fragile stability. The others fear that his instability could bring everything crashing down. Francis's usual charm fades, replaced by a growing sense of isolation. The carefree mask he wore in public slips away in private moments, revealing a young man grappling with the moral weight of their actions. His background and social status, which once provided a sense of security, offer little comfort now. The psychological scars inflicted by their shared guilt deepen with every passing day. Richard's narration captures the slow disintegration of the group with a keen eye for detail and emotion. His reflections on the nature of guilt, loyalty, and the human capacity for self-deception add a philosophical depth to the narrative. He probes the motivations and fears of his friends with compassion, even as he remains acutely aware of his own complicity and isolation. The novel's exploration of moral ambiguity deepens. The characters' justifications for their actions begin to ring hollow as they face the stark reality of what they have done. Their idealized vision of themselves as exceptional above conventional morality clashes with the undeniable truth of their crime. This tension between idealism and reality forms the emotional core of the story. Amid this turmoil, the story also touches on the theme of friendship and betrayal. The bonds that once seemed unbreakable are tested in the harshest way imaginable. The characters must confront not only the external threat of exposure, but the internal fractures that threaten to tear them apart. Their shared secret becomes a wedge as much as a bond, driving them apart even as it binds them together. As the narrative moves forward, the tension continues to mount. The group's fragile balance is increasingly precarious, and the story hints at the possibility of further tragedy. The psychological and emotional stakes have never been higher, and the reader is drawn deeper into the complex web of relationships and moral dilemmas. Donna Tartt's prose remains lush and evocative, painting a vivid portrait of a world where beauty and darkness coexist in uneasy harmony. The story's slow, burning suspense and rich character development keep the reader engaged, creating an immersive experience that lingers long after the page is turned. The group's journey through guilt, fear, and betrayal reflects broader questions about the nature of evil, the search for meaning, and the consequences of human choices. Their story is a haunting meditation on the costs of secrecy and the fragility of human connection. The stage is now set for the unfolding drama to reach new heights, as the pressures bearing down on the group become impossible to ignore. The story's emotional and moral complexities deepen, promising further revelations and challenges that will test the characters to their limits. The pressure that has been quietly mounting finally begins to crack the veneer of calm that the group has desperately tried to maintain. The weight of their shared secret, once born with a fragile sort of pride mixed with terror, becomes a crushing burden impossible to ignore. Each member grapples with their own personal unraveling, and the cracks in their carefully constructed facade widen, revealing the fragility beneath. Richard's observations sharpen as he notices the subtle shifts in his friend's behavior, the small but telling signs of fracture in their relationships. The dynamic within the group, once marked by intellectual camaraderie and almost cult-like devotion to Henry's vision, now teeters on the edge of collapse. Suspicion begins to fester alongside guilt, corroding the bonds that held them together in the aftermath of the murder. No longer is their secret a unifying force. It's becoming a poison, seeping into every interaction, every thought. Henry's stoic control falters in private moments, though he hides it well. His insistence on order and intellectual superiority masks a deep anxiety. It's clear that beneath his commanding exterior lies a mind wrestling with the enormity of what they've done. Yet, instead of seeking solace or forgiveness, Henry doubles down on his philosophy, rationalizing their actions with an almost fanatical conviction. This intellectualizing of guilt seems both a shield and a weapon, something that keeps him detached, but also alienates him from the others. Charles grows increasingly erratic, his paranoia blossoming into outright fear. His once magnetic charm deteriorates as he spirals into bouts of self-loathing and suspicion. The fragile peace of the group is shattered by his unpredictability. Every glance, every whispered conversation feels like a potential trap for him. The very secrecy that was supposed to protect them threatens to expose them through his unraveling mind. The others watch him with a mix of pity and dread, uncertain whether he will crack and confess or disappear into himself, leaving them vulnerable. Camilla remains an enigma, holding her composure even as the storm rages around her. Her quiet strength is a kind of anchor for Richard, who finds in her both comfort and confusion. Their relationship deepens, but it is complicated by the lingering shadows of the murder and the emotional baggage that Camilla carries. She embodies the tragic beauty of their world, a presence both fragile and enduring. Her loyalty to Henry and to the group is tested as tensions rise, yet she remains a figure of grace amidst the chaos. Francis, who once masked his turmoil behind wit and social ease, shows signs of profound weariness. The facade he presents to the world becomes thinner, and his private moments reveal a young man grappling with despair. His privileged background offers no refuge from the guilt that gnaws at him. The parties and distractions lose their allure, replaced by a deep, haunting sadness. The murder has become a scar on his soul, something that no external pleasure can erase. For Richard, the experience becomes increasingly isolating. His initial fascination with the group's intellectual and aesthetic ideals has soured into a complex mix of disillusionment and compulsion. He is caught in a liminal space, too much a part of the group to escape, yet never fully accepted or understood. His narrative reveals a growing awareness of the costs of their actions, not just in legal or moral terms, but in the fracturing of identity and trust. The idealism that drew him in now feels like a cruel joke, a trap that has ensnared him in a nightmare. The story unfolds against the rich backdrop of the Vermont college town, whose serene beauty contrasts starkly with the turmoil of the characters' inner lives. The picturesque landscape, with its old stone buildings, dense woods, and quiet streets, becomes a kind of character in itself, a silent witness to the unfolding tragedy. The seasons turn, and the natural world seems indifferent to human suffering, its cycles continuing with cruel regularity even as the lives of the group spiral out of control. The narrative dives deeper into the psychological complexities of guilt and repression. Each character employs different strategies to cope, yet none finds true peace. The tension between concealment and confession creates a constant undercurrent of suspense. The story explores how secrecy can distort perception, warp relationships, and ultimately consume those who harbor it. The characters' attempts to maintain normalcy, attending classes, socializing, fulfilling academic responsibilities, feel hollow and performative, a thin veneer over the chaos underneath. The novel also examines the shifting power dynamics within the group. Henry's dominance is challenged, subtly but inexorably, by the emotional turmoil of the others. His intellectual authority begins to wane as the others question his judgment and methods, even if they do so only in private. The idealized image of Henry as a guiding force gives way to a more nuanced portrait of a deeply flawed man, struggling to maintain control over a situation that is slipping beyond his grasp. Meanwhile, Camilla and Charles's relationship grows more complicated, fraught with tension and unspoken conflicts. Their shared secret binds them tightly, but also isolates them, creating a private world that excludes even their closest friends. The emotional cost of this secrecy becomes evident in their interactions. Moments of tenderness quickly give way to suspicion and withdrawal. Their love story is marked by the shadow of their crime, a tragic undercurrent that colors every gesture and glance. The novel's treatment of time and memory deepens in this section. Richard reflects on how the past and present intertwine in his mind, how memory can distort as much as reveal. The murder, once a singular event, now feels like a series of moments, fragments of terror, exhilaration, regret, and denial. This fragmented recollection mirrors the fractured state of the group, whose members are trapped in cycles of rumination and avoidance. Francis's gradual withdrawal from the group highlights another facet of the psychological fallout. His flirtations with reckless behavior become more pronounced, and his distancing serves as a warning sign of the group's unraveling. The tension between maintaining appearances and confronting reality intensifies, with Francis caught painfully in the middle. The social fabric of the college community, initially oblivious to the dark undercurrents within this small group, begins to show faint signs of disturbance. Rumors and suspicions start to ripple outwards, subtle but persistent. The sense of impending exposure adds a new layer of urgency and paranoia to the narrative. The idea that the past cannot remain buried, no matter how carefully hidden, looms large. Richard's own internal journey becomes a focal point as he wrestles with his conscience and identity. His narrative voice reveals a young man struggling to reconcile the person he once aspired to be with the reality he now inhabits. The intellectual world he admired, the world of classical learning, beauty, and discipline, has become tainted by violence and deceit. Yet he cannot escape it. He is drawn deeper into the consequences of their shared crime. Donna Tartt's prose in this section is atmospheric and richly detailed, capturing the tension between surface beauty and underlying darkness. Her descriptions evoke a world that is both timeless and deeply contemporary, where ancient philosophical ideas collide with modern anxieties. The story's pacing allows the psychological drama to unfold gradually, immersing the reader in the emotional and moral complexities of the characters' lives. The themes of morality, identity, and the limits of intellectualism become even more pronounced. The group's earlier belief in their own exceptionalism, the idea that they were somehow beyond ordinary moral constraints, begins to unravel under the harsh light of reality. The novel questions the seductive power of such beliefs, showing how easily they can lead to destruction. Amid the mounting tension, moments of fleeting beauty and human connection still shine through. Richard's growing affection for Camilla offers a fragile hope, a reminder that even in darkness, the possibility of grace remains. Yet this hope is tempered by the awareness that their world is fragile and uncertain. As the story progresses, the reader is left with a sense of inevitable reckoning. The carefully maintained equilibrium within the group is unsustainable, and the consequences of their actions are poised to catch up with them. The narrative's psychological depth and moral ambiguity create a haunting and unforgettable portrait of youth, ambition, and tragedy. The atmosphere grows increasingly charged with tension and unease as the fragile threads holding the group together start to fray in ways that are impossible to ignore. The murder, which once felt like a secret pact binding them, now acts more like a slow poison eating away at their collective sanity. The once rigid boundaries between loyalty, fear, and guilt blur, turning friendships into fragile alliances held together by uncertainty and distrust. Richard feels the shifting dynamics intensely, caught between admiration and alienation. His fascination with Henry's brilliance remains, but the facade of perfection cracks under pressure. Henry, who once seemed infallible, now reveals vulnerabilities that unsettle the group. His unwavering belief in their shared intellectual superiority begins to seem less like conviction and more like desperation. As Henry's control slips, the other's doubts become harder to suppress. Charles's paranoia escalates further. His once magnetic and flamboyant personality grows darkened by anxiety, and his unpredictable mood swings create an atmosphere of dread among the group. His fear of exposure and self-destruction looms like a storm cloud, and his erratic behavior causes tension, making others wary of provoking his volatile temper. His descent is a reminder that their crime has shattered the lives of everyone involved, leaving no one untouched by its aftermath. Camilla, the quiet center of the group's emotional world, continues to embody both grace and mystery. Her relationship with Richard deepens, but it is shadowed by the shared trauma that isolates them from others. They find solace in one another, yet their connection is haunted by the unspoken burden they carry. Camilla's silent strength provides Richard with a glimpse of hope, yet the closeness also exposes the fragility beneath her composed exterior. Their bond is a delicate thread in the complex tapestry of guilt and longing. Francis struggles with his own demons, retreating further into a haze of disillusionment and despair. His privileged upbringing, once a source of confidence, now feels like a cage trapping him in a cycle of regret. The hedonistic distractions of parties and social gatherings lose their meaning, revealing the emptiness behind the glamorous veneer. Francis's emotional withdrawal foreshadows a deeper unraveling, a warning that the group's cohesion is not just fragile, but perilously close to collapse. The group's interactions become a delicate dance of avoidance and confrontation, where every word and gesture carries hidden meaning. The underlying fear of exposure creates a constant, simmering tension. Richard's role as the observer intensifies as he watches the slow disintegration of the relationships he once idealized. He senses the growing fissures, but feels powerless to stop them. His own guilt and confusion mirror the chaos around him, making him both participant and chronicler of their downfall. As winter approaches, the cold and darkness outside reflect the emotional climate within the group. The Vermont landscape, with its stark beauty and isolation, serves as a backdrop to the psychological drama unfolding. The ancient architecture and quiet woods, once symbols of timeless knowledge and tradition, now feel oppressive reminders of a past that cannot be escaped. The environment echoes the characters' internal states, emphasizing themes of decay and entrapment. Tensions escalate during a trip the group takes together, a moment that should have been an escape, but instead magnifies their fractures. The idyllic setting only sharpens the sense of impending doom. Small conflicts and old resentments bubble to the surface, exposing the deep wounds left by their shared crime. The veneer of camaraderie breaks down under the strain, and old loyalties are tested as the reality of their situation becomes unavoidable. Henry's intellectual arguments take on a darker edge, as he insists on the necessity of their actions and the superiority of their moral code. His rhetoric grows more extreme, isolating him further. The others begin to question not only their past decisions, but also their present allegiance to his vision. This ideological battle adds another layer of complexity to their unraveling, highlighting the dangerous allure of intellectual arrogance when combined with moral blindness. Camilla's subtle shifts in behavior hint at her own internal struggles. Her quiet resilience masks deep pain, and her relationship with Charles becomes increasingly strained. The tension between love and resentment simmers beneath the surface, complicating the group's fragile balance. Her loyalty to Henry conflicts with her desire for freedom from the suffocating atmosphere they all inhabit. Francis's growing recklessness becomes impossible to ignore. His escapades threaten to expose their secret, raising the stakes for everyone. His flirtations with self-destruction and defiance underscore the novel's themes of youth in crisis, caught between privilege and vulnerability. His behavior acts as a catalyst, forcing the others to confront the unsustainable nature of their situation. The narrative continues to explore the psychological fallout of living with such a dark secret. Each character's coping mechanisms are examined in detail: the denial, the rationalization, the anger, and the despair. The story delves into the corrosive effects of guilt, showing how it warps perception and relationships. The characters' attempts to maintain normalcy, attending classes, socializing, pursuing academic goals feel increasingly hollow as the emotional cost of their crime becomes impossible to ignore. Richard's reflections become more introspective and conflicted. He questions the morality of their actions and the intellectual justifications that once seemed so convincing. His narrative voice carries a growing sense of disillusionment and loss. The world of classical ideals, beauty, and intellectual rigor that attracted him now feels like a trap, a gilded cage that has ensnared him in a web of fear and deception. The group's social circle outside their immediate friends remains oblivious, but the tension of hidden truths creates an almost palpable divide. Rumors and suspicions begin to circulate, subtle and insidious. The fear of discovery haunts their every step, making ordinary interactions fraught with anxiety. The sense that the past cannot remain buried, no matter how carefully concealed, becomes a central theme. The relationships between the characters grow more complex, marked by shifting alliances and unspoken resentments. The loyalty that once seemed unbreakable is tested by fear and mistrust. The novel skillfully portrays the emotional nuances of these fractured friendships, capturing the simultaneous desire for connection and the impulse to protect oneself from further pain. As the narrative progresses, the sense of inevitability tightens around the group. The consequences of their actions loom ever larger, threatening to shatter the fragile equilibrium they have managed to maintain. The psychological suspense builds steadily, drawing the reader deeper into the characters' inner turmoil. Donna Tartt's prose remains richly descriptive and atmospheric, evoking the timeless quality of the setting while probing the depths of human emotion. Her exploration of intellectual obsession, moral ambiguity, and the dark side of beauty continues to resonate powerfully. The story captures the intensity and complexity of youth caught between aspiration and despair, knowledge and ignorance, loyalty and betrayal. Amidst the darkness, moments of tenderness and vulnerability offer brief glimpses of hope. Richard and Camilla's relationship, fraught with tension and longing, embodies the possibility of grace amidst chaos. Yet even these moments are tinged with uncertainty, underscoring the fragile nature of their world. The tension between appearance and reality, knowledge and ignorance, continues to drive the narrative. The group's earlier sense of superiority and control gives way to a painful reckoning with their own limitations and the consequences of their choices. The novel challenges the notion of intellectual exceptionalism, exposing the dangers of moral detachment and the illusion of being above the law. As the story unfolds, the reader is drawn into a world where beauty and darkness coexist, where the pursuit of knowledge leads to both enlightenment and destruction. The characters' journeys are marked by a profound exploration of identity, guilt, and the search for meaning in a fractured world. The atmosphere grows heavier, the tension more palpable, as the narrative moves closer to its climax. The slow unraveling of the group's bonds and the deepening psychological drama keep the reader on edge, invested in the fate of these complex and compelling characters. The cracks in the group's carefully constructed world widen, and the fragile balance that once held them together begins to collapse under the relentless weight of guilt, fear, and suspicion. The murder they committed, intended to bind them forever in a secret brotherhood, instead becomes a dark cloud hanging over every interaction, every moment of silence, every unspoken glance. The air grows thick with paranoia, and the psychological consequences of their actions spiral ever deeper. Richard, ever the observer, senses the growing despair that pervades the group, but struggles to intervene or find any clear path forward. His admiration for Henry's cold intellect and commanding presence has dimmed, replaced by a wary recognition of Henry's increasing instability. Henry's brilliance, once a source of inspiration and awe, now seems to teeter on the edge of obsession and madness. His attempts to rationalize their crime with philosophical arguments ring hollow against the mounting emotional chaos. Charles's mental state continues its rapid decline. Once vibrant and confident, he now oscillates wildly between moments of manic energy and crushing despair. His flamboyance masks a deep fear of exposure and self-destruction, making him increasingly unpredictable. The others grow wary of his volatile outbursts, and the tension between him and the rest of the group escalates, threatening to shatter what little unity remains. His spiral acts as a stark reminder that the consequences of their crime are not just external, but deeply internal, eating away at the very core of their beings. Francis retreats further into a haze of hedonism and nihilism, seeking solace in alcohol, parties, and fleeting pleasures that fail to numb the persistent ache of guilt. His attempts to escape reality only underscore the emptiness at the heart of their existence. The protective facade of privilege and sophistication crumbles, revealing the raw vulnerability beneath. Francis's downward trajectory serves as a mirror reflecting the larger disintegration of the group's idealism and moral compass. Camilla remains a quiet, enigmatic presence amid the chaos. Her relationship with Richard deepens, offering a fragile thread of comfort and connection. Yet even their intimacy is tinged with the shadow of the past. The unspoken secret between them creates a barrier that neither can fully cross. Camilla's serene exterior masks inner turmoil, and her loyalty to Henry and the group is complicated by her yearning for freedom from the suffocating atmosphere. She embodies the tension between grace and despair, love and pain. The group's once brilliant and vibrant discussions of ancient philosophy and classical ideals become increasingly hollow, serving as distractions from the emotional wreckage beneath. Henry's insistence on intellectual rigor and moral superiority grows more desperate and isolating. The others begin to see his arguments not as truths, but as dangerous rationalizations for their actions. The seductive allure of their shared intellectual world dissolves, exposing the fragile foundations on which it was built. The Vermont winter deepens, mirroring the cold isolation that envelops the characters. The stark landscape, with its snow-covered woods and silent, ancient buildings, becomes a symbol of entrapment and decay. The beauty of their surroundings contrasts sharply with the darkness growing within. The setting's timeless quality underscores the novel's themes of history, memory, and the inescapable weight of the past. During a gathering that should have been a moment of solidarity, tensions erupt in a violent confrontation that leaves the group fractured beyond repair. The suppressed emotions, anger, fear, jealousy, and resentment explode, revealing long-hidden conflicts and resentments. The fragile alliances collapse, and the characters confront each other with brutal honesty, stripping away the pretenses that once held them together. Richard finds himself caught in the middle of the storm, his role shifting from observer to reluctant participant. The lines between friend and foe blur, and he experiences firsthand the complexities of loyalty and betrayal. His admiration for his friends is tempered by disappointment and a growing sense of alienation. He struggles to reconcile his idealized vision of the group with the harsh reality of their unraveling relationships. Henry's grip on the group slips completely, his once commanding presence replaced by vulnerability and desperation. His philosophical certainty gives way to paranoia and despair. The intellectual edifice he built to justify their crime crumbles under the weight of his guilt and fear. His unraveling marks a turning point, signaling the irreversible decline of the group's cohesion. The novel's exploration of guilt reaches new depths as each character confronts their own complicity and the personal cost of their actions. The psychological torment is relentless, with moments of intense self-reflection alternating with destructive behavior. The characters' attempts to maintain appearances become increasingly futile, and their internal conflicts spill out into their interactions, fueling mistrust and alienation. Amidst the chaos, Richard's narrative voice becomes more introspective and melancholic. He reflects on the seductive power of beauty and knowledge, and the dangerous allure of believing oneself to be above moral law. His observations reveal the complexity of human nature, the capacity for cruelty and kindness, for intellectual brilliance and profound weakness. The story challenges simplistic notions of good and evil, exploring the gray areas where morality becomes ambiguous and contested. The relationships among the characters grow ever more fraught, marked by a mixture of tenderness, resentment, fear, and longing. Richard and Camilla's fragile bond offers moments of hope, but also highlights the emotional cost of their secret. Their connection is a poignant reminder of the human need for love and understanding, even in the darkest circumstances. The novel's setting remains a powerful character in its own right. The classical architecture, the quiet woods, and the snow-covered landscape create a timeless, almost mythical atmosphere. This setting heightens the novel's exploration of ancient ideals and the modern consequences of pursuing them without regard for ethical boundaries. The environment reflects the characters' isolation and the inevitability of their fate. The narrative builds toward an inevitable confrontation with the past. The tension between secrecy and exposure becomes unbearable, and the characters must face the consequences of their choices. The novel's psychological suspense intensifies, drawing the reader deeper into the characters' inner worlds and the moral dilemmas they face. Donna Tartt's prose remains vivid and evocative, capturing the nuances of emotion and the complexity of character with precision and grace. Her storytelling immerses the reader in a world where beauty and darkness coexist, and where the pursuit of knowledge and perfection leads to both enlightenment and destruction. The themes of the novel, guilt, loyalty, intellectual hubris, and the search for meaning resonate powerfully in this section. The characters' struggles reflect universal questions about identity, morality, and the consequences of our actions. The story challenges the reader to consider the costs of living in a world where appearances deceive and secrets consume. The atmosphere of impending doom thickens as the characters' lives spiral toward an uncertain and tragic conclusion. The psychological tension and emotional complexity keep the reader engaged, invested in the fate of these flawed and compelling individuals. As winter gives way slowly to the tentative breaths of spring, the fragile fabric of the group's unity continues to unravel, stretched thin by mistrust and despair. The murder, once a secret tightly held in the shadows, has become a living, breathing entity within their lives, an unrelenting weight that smothers any possibility of peace. The atmosphere around Hampton College, with its ancient stone buildings and quiet, tree-lined paths, feels stifling, almost haunted, as if the very air itself knows what they have done and whispers reminders in the cold night. Richard remains caught between observer and participant, struggling to maintain a sense of self amid the chaos. His admiration for Henry's intellectual dominance is now tempered with growing apprehension. Henry's earlier calculated calm is replaced by an eerie detachment that hints at something far darker beneath the surface. His eyes, once bright with the joy of philosophical debate and classical knowledge, now seem colder, empty, almost as if the man Richard once knew is slipping away into something unknowable. Henry's command over the group is weakening, but he still wields a dangerous influence that keeps the others tethered to him, even as they fear him. Charles's downward spiral accelerates. His flamboyant charm and reckless bravado no longer mask the profound torment beneath. His nights are filled with reckless partying and alcohol, yet the relief is only temporary. Charles is haunted by the inescapable shadow of their crime and the relentless pressure of his own demons. His relationship with Camilla becomes strained, punctuated by moments of bitter anger and devastating vulnerability. He oscillates between clinging to the group and pushing everyone away, a desperate attempt to hold onto some semblance of control in a world that is unraveling fast. Francis continues his self-destructive path, losing himself in a haze of excess. The parties, the drinking, the fleeting romances, they all serve as futile attempts to drown the guilt that gnaws at him relentlessly. Beneath the surface, there's a desperate longing for redemption. But Francis is trapped in a cycle of denial and escapism, unwilling or unable to confront the consequences of their actions head-on. His external confidence masks an internal disintegration, a man breaking under the weight of what he and his friends have done. Camilla's presence in Richard's life grows more significant, a rare source of comfort amid the chaos. Their connection is tender yet complicated, layered with unspoken fears and guarded hopes. Camilla embodies a fragile grace that contrasts sharply with the turmoil engulfing the others. She is both a sanctuary and a reminder of what might have been if their world had remained untainted. Yet even in their moments of closeness, the secret they share acts as an invisible barrier, a reminder that true freedom may be forever out of reach. As the group fractures further, the novel's exploration of guilt and morality deepens. Each character is forced to confront the truth of their complicity and the irrevocable damage their crime has caused, not only to the victim, but to themselves. Their earlier philosophical justifications, rooted in classical ideals and intellectual superiority, now seem painfully hollow. The ideals that once bound them together now serve only to highlight their fallibility and the brutal reality of human weakness. Henry's philosophical musings take on a darker tone, his earlier idealism corroded by fear and despair. He clings to an increasingly twisted rationale to make sense of their actions, trying to convince himself and the others that what they did was a necessary act of preserving their unique world. But the more he tries to control the narrative, the more obvious it becomes that he is spiraling into madness. His detachment borders on cruelty, and the group grows wary of his unpredictability. The ancient world that once inspired and enchanted them now feels like a cage. The classical references and Greek tragedies that formed the backbone of their conversations have transformed into grim reminders of fate, consequence, and downfall. The beauty and order they sought in those texts have been replaced by chaos and decay. The idyllic environment of Hampton becomes a prison, where every corner and shadow echoes with the memories of their deed. Tensions come to a head during a confrontation fueled by jealousy, fear, and long-suppressed resentments. The simmering conflicts explode violently, leaving the group irrevocably damaged. Old wounds are torn open, and bitter accusations fly. Trust, once the foundation of their brotherhood and sisterhood, is shattered beyond repair. The characters are forced to face each other not as the intellectual elites they imagined themselves to be, but as fragile, broken humans caught in the aftermath of their own moral failure. Richard finds himself increasingly isolated, caught between loyalty and disillusionment. His narrative voice grows more reflective and somber as he wrestles with the consequences of his own choices and the cost of belonging to this group. He understands that the idealism he once felt has been crushed under the weight of reality, leaving behind a raw, painful truth. His journey is one of painful self-discovery and reluctant acceptance. The relationship between Richard and Camilla continues to evolve, offering moments of bittersweet hope. Their connection is tender, a brief respite from the turmoil that surrounds them. Yet even their affection is tinged with uncertainty and the fear that their shared secret will forever define and limit them. Camilla's quiet strength is a beacon, but it also serves as a poignant reminder of the sacrifices they have all made. As the story progresses, the theme of inevitability becomes more pronounced. The characters are trapped in a cycle of consequences they cannot escape, haunted by the past even as they try to move forward. The novel's exploration of fate, free will, and moral responsibility reaches its peak, challenging readers to grapple with the complexities of human nature and the blurry lines between right and wrong. The vivid descriptions of the setting continue to enhance the mood, with the changing seasons mirroring the emotional and psychological shifts in the characters. The ancient college buildings, the snow-laden woods, and the quiet, reflective spaces all contribute to a haunting atmosphere that underscores the novel's tension and tragedy. Donna Tartt's prose remains deeply evocative, weaving a narrative that is both intellectually stimulating and emotionally gripping. Her ability to capture the nuances of character and mood draws readers into a world where beauty and darkness coexist, where intellectual pursuit and human frailty collide. The story's psychological depth and moral ambiguity keep the reader engaged, inviting reflection long after the final page. As the tension builds toward the novel's climax, the characters are forced to confront the full consequences of their actions. The once tight-knit group, united by a shared secret and lofty ideals, is now fractured and vulnerable, each member struggling to survive the emotional wreckage in their own way. The narrative suspense and emotional complexity reach new heights, making the story both a compelling mystery and a profound exploration of the human psyche. The story draws toward its haunting conclusion with an intensity that is both inevitable and devastating. The fragile alliances and tenuous sanity of the group continue to unravel, and the consequences of their crime come crashing down with full force. The atmosphere around Hampton College, once steeped in classical ideals and intellectual fascination, now feels irrevocably tainted, as if the shadows of their actions have seeped into the very stones and trees surrounding them. The world that Richard and his friends once believed they controlled has slipped through their fingers, leaving behind a residue of fear, regret, and broken dreams. Henry's once formidable presence has eroded into something fragile and unstable. His earlier commanding intellect and stoic demeanor have been replaced by erratic behavior and chilling detachment. The man who had so tightly gripped the reins of their secret now seems haunted by ghosts only he can see. His philosophical justifications for the murder, once cloaked in high-minded theory, now sound hollow and desperate. His grip on reality loosens, and the tension between his need for control and the chaos within him becomes painfully apparent. There is a growing sense that Henry's downfall is imminent, but the group remains trapped in his orbit, unable or unwilling to break free. The other members of the group suffer in their own ways. Charles, whose flamboyant charm masked deeper insecurities and vulnerabilities, becomes increasingly unstable. His reckless behavior escalates, his parties and excesses serving only as temporary escapes from the crushing guilt that threatens to consume him. His relationship with Camilla grows strained, filled with unspoken tension and unresolved emotions. There is a tragic vulnerability to Charles, a man caught between the desire for freedom and the weight of his past. Francis, once confident and commanding, falls further into self-destruction. His bravado is stripped away layer by layer, revealing a man drowning in shame and fear. His drinking and escapism intensify, but the relief they bring is fleeting. He is haunted not only by the murder, but by the realization that their intellectual sanctuary has been irrevocably shattered. His internal struggle reflects the larger theme of the story, the clash between idealism and reality, between the pursuit of beauty and the harsh consequences of human action. Camilla remains a poignant figure amidst the turmoil. Her quiet strength and grace provide a fragile anchor for Richard, who finds himself drawn to her in a way that transcends the chaos around them. Their relationship is complicated by the secret they share, a bond forged in the aftermath of tragedy, but shadowed by fear and uncertainty. Camilla embodies both hope and loss, a symbol of what might have been and a reminder of what has been irrevocably changed. Richard himself continues to evolve as a narrator and as a character. His voice becomes more introspective and somber, marked by a deepening awareness of the moral complexity of their situation. He grapples with his own complicity and the cost of his involvement, caught between admiration for his friends and a growing desire to escape the suffocating world they have created. His reflections offer a window into the psychological toll of guilt and the difficulty of finding redemption. The tension within the group reaches a breaking point in a series of confrontations that are as emotionally charged as they are inevitable. Old grievances and fears come to the surface, and the veneer of camaraderie cracks under the strain. The characters are forced to confront not only each other, but themselves, acknowledging the damage their crime has wrought on their lives and psyches. The novel's exploration of trust and betrayal reaches a climax, revealing the fragility of human relationships under extreme pressure. As the narrative moves toward resolution, the theme of fate versus free will remain central. The characters struggle to assert control over their destinies, but the consequences of their actions seem to dictate a path they cannot escape. The tension between choice and inevitability echoes through their decisions, their regrets, and their attempts at forgiveness. This interplay of agency and destiny deepens the story's philosophical resonance and invites readers to consider the limits of morality and justice. The setting continues to play a vital role in shaping the mood and tone. The stark, cold landscapes of Vermont, the shadowy woods, and the imposing architecture of Hampton College create a sense of isolation and entrapment. These physical surroundings mirror the internal confinement experienced by the characters, emphasizing the novel's meditation on imprisonment, both literal and psychological. In the final scenes, the narrative suspense builds with an urgency that is both gripping and tragic. The consequences of their murder and the subsequent unraveling of their group become impossible to ignore. Each character's fate unfolds with a mixture of inevitability and surprise, as secrets are revealed and past actions catch up with them. The culmination is both a resolution and a haunting reminder of the costs of their choices. Donna Tartt's masterful prose shines brightest in these concluding moments, blending intricate character study with a richly atmospheric setting. The story's psychological depth is matched by its emotional intensity, creating a powerful and memorable ending that lingers in the reader's mind. The balance of beauty and darkness, intellect and emotion, idealism and reality culminates in a narrative that is as thought-provoking as it is engrossing. Reflecting on the novel's themes, it is clear that The Secret History is more than a suspenseful mystery or a story of crime. It is a profound exploration of human nature, of the hunger for meaning, the allure of beauty, the complexity of guilt, and the fragile boundaries that separate morality from madness. The character's journey illuminates the dangers of unchecked ambition and intellectual hubris, while also revealing the deep yearning for connection and understanding. The impact of the novel lies in its ability to engage readers on multiple levels, offering a gripping plot, while also posing challenging questions about ethics, identity, and the consequences of our choices. Its richly drawn characters, atmospheric setting, and philosophical undercurrents have earned it a lasting place in contemporary literature, captivating audiences and sparking debate. Ultimately, the story of Richard and his friends serves as a cautionary tale about the costs of idealism pursued without regard for reality. It is a reminder that beauty and intellect, while powerful and inspiring, can become dangerous when divorced from empathy and moral responsibility. The secret they keep is a burden that changes them irrevocably, shaping their lives in ways they cannot undo. As the last pages turn, the haunting echoes of their story remain. legacy of their actions reverberates beyond the confines of Hampton College, a testament to the enduring complexity of human nature and the thin line between light and darkness. The Secret History leaves readers with a lingering sense of melancholy and reflection, a novel that challenges and captivates long after the final word. Donna Tartt's The Secret History is a remarkable novel that transcends the conventions of the traditional murder mystery. At its core, it is a deep meditation on the allure of beauty, the intoxicating power of intellect, and the dark consequences of unchecked ambition. Through the tightly woven narrative of Richard and his enigmatic friends, the novel explores how the pursuit of transcendence and perfection can lead to moral blindness and destruction. The story challenges readers to consider the fragile boundaries between right and wrong, sanity and madness, friendship and betrayal. It reveals how secrecy and isolation can distort reality, creating a dangerous world where idealism is twisted into justification for unspeakable acts. Yet, amidst the darkness, Tartt also portrays a profound yearning for connection and understanding, embodied in Richard's reflections and his complex relationships. The Secret History has resonated widely since its publication, captivating audiences with its lush prose, psychological depth, and atmospheric setting. Its influence can be seen in how it paved the way for a new kind of literary thriller, one that combines intellectual rigor with emotional complexity and moral ambiguity. The novel invites readers not just to unravel a mystery, but to grapple with enduring questions about human nature, guilt, and redemption. Ultimately, the novel stands as a cautionary tale about the dangers of living too much in the realm of ideas and too little in the realm of consequence. It reminds us that beauty and intellect, while vital and inspiring, must be tempered by empathy and responsibility. Tartt's work remains a timeless exploration of the human condition, both its capacity for greatness and its vulnerability to darkness. For those who journey through its pages, The Secret History offers a haunting, unforgettable experience, one that lingers long after the final chapter, urging us to reflect on the secrets we keep, the choices we make, and the truths we cannot escape.